I continue to see a lot of discussion about the isolation-heavy basketball that's being played by Team USA. And a lot of people are complaining about different things, blaming the NBA, blaming AAU basketball, saying the basketball in the US just isn't good anymore, and a lot of other things. But to me, if you think about the way that basketball has changed, especially the way that we practice basketball has changed from generation to generation, the isolation-heavy basketball that you see is probably what we should expect, especially in a situation where there's not a lot of time to put together a team practice and a team system like there would be in, say, a high school or a college preseason. The way that players practice now in the off-season is they spend a lot of time with their personal trainers, and these typically involve one-on-0 drills, whether ball handling, shooting, passing, whatever, but they're typically 1-on-0, so no teammates and really no defense. And so when you're in that environment, what can you practice? Well, you can practice one-on-one moves without a defender, but you're practicing basically individual moves and individual shooting. There's not a lot else that you can practice when you're by yourself. And so to juxtapose that, the time that a lot of high school players today spend in these individual workouts with their private coaches used to be spent in pickup games or open gyms with their high school teams. So when I was in high school, in the off season, if we weren't playing a different sport, we generally spent, I think 3 days a week we had open gym at our high school, followed by weights. And the other 2 days, usually we'd go and play pickup games at the park. Generally, one or two of the teammates would go together. And then we played in a spring league where we played with and against different players. And it was a semi-structured spring league, kind of quote unquote like AAU basketball is now. And so most of our time was spent getting shots in game situations, working with different types of players, learning to play with different types of players, defend different types of players, so on and so forth, as opposed to simply working on individual moves on our own, getting immediate feedback from a coach. And so I think some of the difference that we see is this difference in practice. I know when I lived in Europe when I was 19, I remember coming home and saying, the way that they run practices and stuff is great, and they're really skilled. They just don't know how to play basketball. Everything was drilled, and they were very skilled in terms of shooting, and they did a lot of precise passing drills. At least my club. But then we got into games, and our team was actually pretty good, but really didn't have that same type of mentality in games as I felt like my high school team did, and playing in the States before then. And so then when I went back to Europe, 10 years later, practices were much different. There was a lot more small-sided games involved, and there was a lot more, teams played a lot more games during the year. So when I was there, we probably played 20 to 25 games the whole season. And then when I got back to Europe, teams were playing more like 30 to 40 games in a season. So they were increasing the amount of time on court, the number of games that they were playing. And you could see that they were more comfortable in game situations. And so while games aren't the only learning environment, when we're speaking about tactical skills and playing off the ball and playing with teammates, we need team situations to learn those skills, whether it's a team practice, team scrimmages, pickup games, or organized games. All of these together provide the environment where we can start to learn these skills and learn to play with each other and learn to play with different teammates. When we spend a large portion of our off-season practicing just by ourselves with nobody else, no teammates, no defense, there's no possibility to develop these skills. I mean, you can run around cones and chairs and so on and so forth all day, but that's not teaching you how to read a defensive player. It's not teaching you how to read your own teammate and make decisions based on how he or she's going to play. So everything that I do on the court is going to be affected by and also affect my teammates and the defensive players. So if I move one way, that affects my teammate. If my teammate moves one way, it affects me. And so there's constant interplay and interactions between teammates and defenders. And you can't replicate that with cones or with chairs, and even really with, your coach just standing out there so you can practice a one-on-one move against a coach. You need to be in these environments where you're playing in game-like situations or simply in games so that you can learn to play off each other. I mean, even to this day, when I play with my friends that I grew up playing with, we still know how to play together, even though we can go 6-8 months without playing together, because we learn the game in the same way. We learned together, in a lot of senses, playing a lot on pickup games and then on the same team and so on. We played so much together growing up that when we get on teams and pickup games, sometimes it's unfair because we can read each other and we know what we're going to do and we know each other's games pretty well. And so part of that you see with other teams, when they're national teams, when players have grown up and played a lot together throughout their adolescence and stuff, they still have that, even though they play, on different NBA teams or whatever. They can come together and they know each other's games a little bit better than a lot of the NBA players who may have never played with or against some of their teammates, growing up and through the years. And on the women's side, you can see that a little bit better because you see, there's 5 UConn players and 4 players that play for Minnesota in the WNBA. So they have that. They've played together. And so even though the system may be different and the instructions may be different, at this point, they have that same kind of base general knowledge, and they know how to play off of each other and to read each other, and they can expect and anticipate what their teammates are going to do. And a lot of that comes again from playing in that 5-on-5 environment and really, or small-sided games environment, really learning how to read the other people on the court, whether the defensive players or your teammates. And when we spend so much time in individual practice, I mean, I know some players, who spend 3 to 4 days a week working out with their private coach without anybody else on the court, no defense, no teammates. And then they go to, maybe one AAU practice a week, where they pretty much run through their plays, and do some shooting drills and maybe a shell drill or something, and then they play some games on the weekend. And then when they get in the weekend, because they haven't really practiced together as a team, and sometimes, there's players coming in from different areas and they've never really practiced together, there's a lot of isolation because they don't know each other. They haven't accumulated that time on court together, and so they have to simplify the system, and the simplest system and the easiest way to win then, get the best player the ball, spread the court, go one-on-one, drive and kick, and that's what you see a lot because it's hard and it takes time and it takes a high level of basketball intelligence to be able to move and communicate non-verbally and work together as a team within a semi-structured or unstructured environment. And so, it's often termed kind of the old man game at the park when you go and you see, some 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds out there playing, and they can beat a team of, 20-year-olds because they can, they make backdoor cuts and they know how to set a screen and roll, and, they can do these things because they have that experience. They've played so long. Oftentimes they've played together. They have kind of this group experience that they can draw from. Whereas, the young guys typically will be out there kind of playing on their own and trying to do their thing and more isolation and so on and so forth. And, a little bit, that's what, we're seeing to a certain extent in the NBA, in the Olympics, is a team that's coming together kind of at the last moment, just trying to get together and do the best they can versus some other teams who have kind of that knowledge base from having grown up in a similar environment. But to me also it comes back to, if we spend so much time in individual practice, we're going to play like individuals. If we want players who play a collective brand of basketball, we need to practice collectively. To emphasize a point that my friend Harry Manninen from Finland has made. In collective practice, you can still work on individual skills, shooting, passing, dribbling, in collective practice, but it has more of a game-like representation because you're incorporating, reading defenders, reading teammates, reading the situations, reading, the choice whether to shoot, drive, etc. And so it becomes more game-like from that sense, but it's also more collective practice, so we learn how to play together as opposed to learning how to play as an individual in individual practice.